Traders, because of Vinny coming to you from theclosingprint.com, March 27th, 2022. In this edition of your weekend video newsletter, we'll discuss the indices, all of which moved higher last week with the exception of IWM, which trailed less than 0.5%. NASDAQ and growth stocks followed through on above average volume, while most sectors moved higher. In addition, we saw Bitcoin turning the corner. It looks like we might see a sustained rally over the next several weeks, maybe the next couple of months, with most of our indicators bullish at 16, 2 are neutral, and 2 are bearish. One of the bearish indicators is junk bonds and high yield corporate debt. That's something we need to keep an eye on this week. Going into the last week of March, we have the S&P support at 4,500 and resistance at 4,600. Zero gamma at 4,506, the zone we need to stay above. Considering market seasonality, we have April, one of the strongest months of the year, just a week away, with Friday the 1st of April providing some potential seasonality and a tailwind for the S&P 500. Last week, we managed to stay above the 200-day moving average. We tagged the 100 period. It's the last area of resistance before we could pop up to 4,600 and 4,650, an area with the largest gamma and therefore resistance into Friday, April 1st. We continue to see RSI reflecting strength of trend, while volume was below what we saw to start the week. One area of concern as stochastic is embedded above 80 and MACD is above its signal line. So generally this is pretty bullish, but there is a possibility we could consolidate a little more right in this area before following through. And we will note at 4,600 the S&P is likely in overbought territory in the short term. We saw an attempt on Friday to get above that resistance level, but was rejected. We did see some light put buying and implied volatility expansion that helped pressure the S&P back down to support at 4,500. So we're thinking that we're going to probably see more chop to start the week until we see calls bought further out in time. With that, we saw a destruction of ultra short dated implied volatility in light of the passing of FOMC and a put-heavy March options expiration. That bolstered that rotation back into equities and out of defensive assets like bonds, which extended their route lower last week. Finally, we are coming into a quarterly options expiration week with more potential for pinning action as close to the money bets concentrated in that expiration near the end of their life cycle. Charm is kicking in full force. Finally, with regard to the S&P 500, there's an increased potential for stability so long as participants maintain S&P prices above the volatility trigger down at 44.30. So long as we stay above the 20 EMA on this 60-minute chart, the trend is bullish, while we're giving the edge to the potential for a sideways trade going into the end of the month and options expiration for the quarter. If we look at the Qs, we had a nice follow-through week. We closed right at the longer-term moving averages. RSI is trying to move above 50 and this volume by price resistance zone. As many of you traded Apple, Nvidia, Google, and other growth names starting in the previous week, that followed through into last week. So starting off the week with the Qs and growth stocks were bullish to slightly neutral. Volume was above average for a second week, and MACD is turning along with stochastic. So this is a nice setup. If we can just see a little follow through in growth, we'll probably be buying some of those names again this week, albeit in shorter term swings and day trades. The more promising development in Bitcoin has price action in many of the Bitcoin stocks moving higher, breaking out of consolidation as a potential phase 2 follow-through starts. Accumulation is phase one. That's where institutions pick up most of their positions, followed by the markup phase where they lift their offers. While we can clearly see a change of trend with Bitcoin for the second week closing above the 10-period EMA in this ascending channel that started back in 2021. So if this consolidation leads to a breakout, we could see some really nice action in Bitcoin stocks over the next several weeks and next several months. 70,000 is the upper part of that channel, an area we would look for prices in Bitcoin stocks and Bitcoin to follow through into year end. Small caps were the disappointing group last week, still looking bullish off of the bottom part of this sideways range, but we did close less than 0.5% lower last week, making it one of our bearish indicators given the nature of this risky asset group, along with junk bonds, which we'll discuss in a few minutes. Finally, we're watching the put-call ratio, equity only, with these extreme low levels being more calls are bought together with more speculation. As we ease into the quarterly expiration and end of month, starting April 1st on Friday, previous highs have been marked by lows or more call buying by individual investors. So this is something we'll need to watch going into this week. ABCD pattern, potentially starting with A at this point, B on Friday. The bond stock ratio is bullish for equities as this red line drops along with the blue 65-period weekly moving average. So when this happens, we favor equities over bonds, with the S&P 500 above its 50-period weekly moving average, with bonds moving lower and bearish with yields moving higher. The one caveat, of course, is high yield and junk bonds. Both of them could bounce, but had a lackluster week. Coming into the last week of March, we'd like to see this moving higher. If it starts to move lower, this is a bearish signal for equities, which could lend to that resistance at 4,600 that we're anticipating this week. In addition, the safety trade is still on. The US dollar is in a pennant pattern. Having rallied 3 weeks ago into the last couple of weeks, we've been consolidating in a tight range. Any moves higher should put pressure on commodities. So if the dollar does move lower, look for gold to push off of this 1940 level and maybe push back up to the highs, along with silver in a similar area of consolidation. Finally, with many analysts suspecting that crude oil could get to $200 a barrel, I wince at that idea, but crude oil is bullish, and at this level, it's really an impediment to equities. So we'd like to see this pull back in the short term. For now, moves higher in Brent and West Texas crude allow for trades in your favorite oil and gas names, while being a headwind for equities. The sector heat map is still green for the most part, with some weakness reflected in home builders. International markets still lime green. With most sectors performing, we had transports pushing higher, XBI, small cap biotechs fading as well, oil and gas equipment and services pushing to highs, materials with a bullish push, RSI above 50 and rising, communications at the 50, we have RSI above 50, energy trying to push and break out, financials are bullish thanks to yields moving higher, industrials are rallying, so make sure you check out your favorite industrial stocks like John Deere, Caterpillar, 3M, etc. Volume showing institutions have been buying. Technology taking a little bit of a breather, attempting a breakout above last week's price action. Consumer staples also rally. Utilities pushed higher. Note the volume as institutions RSI is near 70. Healthcare still above its ascending 9 and 21 day, with consumers discretionary consolidating above the 50 day. We'd like to see retail following through while it consolidates for the last week. Finally, with regard to consumer discretionary versus consumer staples, this is one of the other bearish indicators that we had going into this week. That has turned over like it did back in late 2018 when the Fed raised rates 4 times. We're in a similar situation. If this continues to move lower, that's a bearish indication for equities, even though we have April approaching one of the seasonally strongest months of the year. So keep an eye on XLY XLP ratio. The IBD 50 has quite a few names that are showing strength this week, with many of them closing above their VWAP for Friday on these 5-minute charts. You can see AMD closed above, ATSG, AOSL, another semiconductor manufacturer, Google, AMPH, ANET, and so on. Looking for Broadcom to follow through. As we look for semiconductors to push higher again this week, Broadcom RSI above 50, breaking above pivots, which could lead to 52-week highs. So we get above this pivot right here at 626.75. Broadcom closed at 628, so we'd like to see a follow through. Notice that buyers stepped up the past 2 trading days at the low of the day. 90 EMA 21 day are above the 50 and rising. CF Industries and many of the fertilizer stocks continue to move higher, with food producers scrambling to plant and produce corn and wheat, which have been severely curtailed in Russia and Ukraine. Looking for those to continue higher. Cleveland Cliffs and the U.S. Steel, Steel Dynamics, all of those stocks moved higher last week along with Nucor, as steel producers saw that surge in demand, push their stocks much higher. Cleveland Cliffs in the 30s, with volume reflecting institutions accumulating shares, with many of the steel names breaking out of weekly patterns. Nucor, Cleveland Cliffs, Steel Dynamics, all looking good, following through. After consolidating for about 8 months, these steel names broke out of these weekly bases. Notice oscillators are turning more bullish now, signaling potential follow through. I wouldn't chase it. I'd look for little flags and consolidation now for any new entries, with U.S. Steel breaking out of its year-long base that started back in 2021, following through for the last 6 weeks, with oscillators bullish and turning. Commercial metals, material stocks, metals and mining looking good. CMRE, Costamare, the shipping group looking strong. With Costamare, this one is showing rising profit estimates over at IBD. We're looking for a follow through. Every time it pulls back to the 9 EMA lately, it's been bought. So we're looking for a follow through this week. In addition to Zim Integrated, which we've been looking for this pullback that we might be able to buy. Zim Integrated selling into strength last week, along with Matson, another bulk container maritime shipper that's looking very strong. Every time it comes back to the 9 EMA, we look for buyers to show up and then look for the follow through. RSI showing muscle and strength of trend. As we look for Broadcom, AOSL, AMD, and other chip stocks to move higher, we're looking for NVIDIA to continue this trend of higher highs and higher lows. The 9 and 21 has crossed through the 50-day. Everything is back above the 200-day, with RSI above 50. As we trade ETFs like SOXL and SMH, these also look pretty strong, looking for the follow-through, with volume by price resistance suggesting that any move above the 200-day, after pushing through 42 to 48, if we get above the 200-day, look for this volume by price area to give way to a fast appreciation in prices back up to this ceiling over here on the left side of the chart. Generally very bullish price action as we look for follow-through. Most of these stocks from the RSI improving and stochastic scans looking very strong for this week, so make sure you check these out. And also make sure you're checking out earnings dates. These look good. Volume increasing. Stochastics turning. Real estate did fairly well last week. Look for American Homes for Rent to push higher as well, get above the 200-day. Stochastics is turning higher. CBZ, a lot of the stocks that showed up on the scan, I don't trade that often, so you need to do a little bit of research. These do look bullish though, Thursday and Friday, pushing off the 9 and 21-day, above the 50-day, RSI above 50, and above these volume by price bands. These could break out. Volume increasing, MACD's above a signal line, and stochastics are turning. Utility stocks did fairly well last week. This one, CPK, Chesapeake Utilities, looking for a follow-through. Note stochastics in this configuration usually leads to a nice rally like it did last time. Another real estate stock, Camden Property Trust, looking for a follow-through. RSI is pushing through 50. Stochastics is turning from oversold. Volume increasing. MACD's about to turn. Centerspace, another name haven't traded before. I don't know what it does, so you need to check it out. Find out when earnings are on deck. Stochastics oversold, looking for a follow-through and a push back up to these recent highs. Cushman and Wakefield, looking for a follow-through. Stochastics rising, volume picking up. A push through the 9, 21, and 50-day. Higher low, looking for a higher high above the 50-day this week. Another real estate name, ESS Essex Property Trust, looking for the break above these pivots. In the short term, volume picking up. Note stochastic is turning. Energy names like Southwest Gas continues to push higher. VTOL, Bristow Group, looking for a push higher here as well. Cup and handle, W-shaped pattern, looking for a break above the handle. Stochastics turning, MACD as well. A lot of the banks moving higher with higher yields. West America Bancorp looking for a follow-through. Stochastics turning, along with MACD and volume picking up. Don't forget the Bitcoin stocks. Those are looking pretty strong. Looking for a follow-through this week. Riot, Mara, ETHE, Ethereum, and Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, GBTC, all of which are waiting for a break higher with Bitcoin. These are starting to move towards the 200-day moving average. Finally, we have stocks from the Blue Dot scan, many of them showing up last week. Look for these names to push higher. These stocks show relative strength line at new highs with stocks ready to break out, like HPQ. RS line is at a new high. Potential breakout this week in HP. PST, Blue Dot scan, Permian Basin Realty, trust holding overriding royalty interests in producing oil and gas properties in Texas. Looking for a follow-through. Apple also showing up on the Blue Dot scan this week. Looking for a breakout. RS line is at 91 and climbing. Volume shows institutions have been picking up shares. Earnings looking really good going forward. SIGI looking for a follow-through. About to break out as well. Selective Insurance, SIGI. Insurance names were highlighted last week in the trading room. Brian was talking about some of the stocks that might follow through, like AIG, Travelers, and Cincinnati Financial. These are showing improving RS lines. RADA, that's one that Frank and a few people in the trading room took on Friday, I believe. RS line, you can see here as it eases up into a breakout zone, relative strength line is at highs. Volume picks up and the stocks break out. While it's not a guarantee, we do look for a follow-through after showing up on a Blue Dot scan. Canadian National Railway, keep an eye on the transports and railway stocks. This one's about to break out. Look where RS line is. It's about to push to new highs as the stock readies to break out. Okay, traders, that's going to do it for me. This is Cousin Vinny coming to you from theclosingprint.com. with your weekend video newsletter. Make sure you check out the names in the opening monologue, as many of these stocks suggest a follow-through for the week, provided we see strength in the indices. I'll send out a watch list later tonight around 12 midnight on the East Coast, around 9 o'clock on the West Coast, so be sure to check your inbox for that. Otherwise, take care, have a great weekend, what's left of it, and I'll talk to you in the trading room in the morning. Ciao.